it actually matters. And yeah, hope you can learn something. Fun fact about land runs and homesteading, the last time you could actually go just homestead and go place a flag on a piece of land, this ended in Alaska in 1986. So I just missed it. Anyway, so markets are a way of distributions. So if you've ever heard of the term, like what is a market or a free market, for these definitions, it's basically you have a market economy if you give away or distribute a good to the highest bidder. And if you do this for everything, then you have a completely free market economy. But for the longest time, like, we actually didn't distribute things this way. For most of human history, markets were, relatively rare. You would use them barter for international trade, but most of the distribution, not that you had much excess in society. So if you had a small local economy, 90% of people were farmers. So like, if you were a farmer, your kids were also farmers. If your dad was a blacksmith, you became a blacksmith. It was relatively easy. There weren't these labor markets that we have today. And this wasn't necessarily a choice either. Like, it's not like authoritarians back then didn't want to have more strict control over everything. It was just a technological problem. Everything had to be relatively local because you couldn't really go to, you couldn't monitor all of these cities all over your regions. Even if you think about Athenian democracy, this was literally like one city. You couldn't have democracy very big because you just couldn't communicate like that. But as time goes on, basically we develop ways to communicate better, and we also develop ways to distribute things better, and markets tend to be one of them. Whenever we think about digital markets and digital assets are a lot like money. They're a legal asset that's for distribution. So if you think about, let's make a digital asset out of some land. So if we have 100 acres of land outside of Philadelphia, and we're gonna tokenize it. So we'll turn it into a whole bunch of tokens, and we can trade these tokens around. The actual land doesn't change at all, right? The land is still just the land, but maybe we can automate it a little bit better. Maybe we can have a Uniswap pool that trades this thing around. Maybe we can have some price discovery that maybe you have some mark-to-market issues that are solved. Maybe people in faraway lands can now speculate on the price of land outside of Philadelphia, if that's something you might want. The digitization of this stuff, it doesn't actually change the property of what you're doing, but it does change how we interact with them, and that's an important piece. Okay, so why would you want markets? Why would you, decide to just go ahead and, if we have this land, we're gonna give it to the highest bidder, or if we have something, we're basically just going to auction it off in some way. The first piece is that it's more efficient. So markets, in a lot of ways, it's like placing an open bounty on something. So like an open bounty for lower costs. So if you can move production somewhere else and provide the good at a lower cost, markets allow you to do this. The other thing is that it enables interactions with less trust. So a little story on money here. Like, a lot of times we think of money as like a medium of exchange, but the way I want you to think about money for this context is like almost as a measuring tool. So you can think about money, let's say we have a little local economy, and we all know what everybody is doing. There's probably not a need for money. I'm working, I know you're working, but if we want to monetize it, how about this? Every time you do a favor for me, I'm going to give you some money. And every time I do a favor for you, you give me some money. Now, if you extrapolate this out to everybody, what should your bank balance represent? It actually represents now the sum of all the favors that you've done or received in society. So if you have a very large bank balance, people owe you a favor, right? And now, even if I don't know you, if I see that you have a big bank balance, now I can do a favor for you because you probably deserve one, right? Obviously, the morality of this aside, does your bank balance actually represent your utility to society? That's probably debatable. In a large context, it's actually based upon what you consider as a favor, which maybe that there are actually books written on that. But the last piece about markets, and the reason I think most of the time we use them here in crypto, is that they remove governance, right? If you want to distribute a token, part of the problem with how do you distribute a token goes into, well, like who gets what? And everybody knows the problems with, like, even if you have a grants program, it's very, very hard to take the humanity out of it in the sense of, like, some people take more than others, some people feel like it's unfair. If you just have a market for it, you have some rules of you do this, you get this, supposedly people would assume that this is more fair, removes the uncomfortable discussion of having to actually get to know and figure out what people deserve. Okay, so what are the downsides of markets? And then we're going to get into specific crypto examples and how some of them break down. The biggest downside of, or I guess you can't really rank any of these. One of the downsides of markets is in transiency. So by transiency, I just mean the fluidity of stuff. The easiest way to think about this is in globalization of manufacturing. So if you have a factory here and it can, if they move production overseas, it will lower costs. That will happen if it's a completely free market. Also in labor, so like if labor needs to move downtown to go find jobs in a free market, labor will all move downtown. You know, maybe it got small towns. That might not be the best thing. But for crypto, let's say, you know, capital too is also really fluid. So, you know, thinking back to our little money and favors, part of the reason that money works really well and the reason that people like the idea of like local currencies is that you want it to be circular. If I do you a favor, you're going to do me a favor. You don't even necessarily care about how much you're spending as much because it kind of stays in the system. But being able to exit with your capital, it becomes a problem. So,
I think that makes a kind of subtle point that money in motion is what counts.
Sure, yeah, it's money in motion does count, and this is for crypto too. Like another big, you know, we're creating this global, unstoppable financial system, right? Or at least that's what people say is the goal. But is that actually what you want? Do you want money to be fluid across borders? Maybe, but you know, like if you're talking to a policymaker here in the US, do they want people to be able to take their value and move it across borders? Maybe not. You know, like even, like I have an article on this from back in like 2019, I should send out, but there's the idea of like liquidity. Everyone always loves the idea of liquidity for our tokens. We want more liquidity is generally seen as a really good thing. The problem, however, is that maybe it's not always a good thing. You know, like there's a reason that like insiders in traditional stocks are locked up, or at least they have to say when they're going to sell. Or like the old VC cycle of you have to invest money and now this is locked with the company for 5-10 years until they actually go public. But now it's instantly liquid. Now, as soon as they don't believe in you, their value is taken out. You know, like a lot of times whenever we think about why did we start a cryptocurrency, the idea was like, oh, well, we're gonna make communities and the tokens are gonna tie them to the community, right? You're gonna have some loyalty because you have a token. Has that really worked out? Like, probably not. You know, now like it's actually, since you have liquidity, you sell it, you take your value with you to the next thing that you hope will pump a little bit higher, right? Like it's actually done the opposite of creating stable communities.
Except for Trump.
Except for Trump.
Except for Bitcoin and Ethereum and a couple of layer ones, but yeah.
Sure.
Some layer ones have a pretty strong continuing community.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah, but still, it's an issue when you talked about you digitize a land. Your digital coin has a value behind it, which is the land. So it represents something that is invaluable.
Well,
When somebody gonna go and just does a meme or whatever you want to do, I mean, it doesn't have really anything behind it except hype
Yeah.
or right? Because you can't in essence do anything with it, just like right.
But like at this, like he's saying that should something have something behind it to be digitized, but like part of what crypto is you can value the potential. So like that's what right
Yeah, but what's the
meme, but
potential? Potential.
well, I mean, what's
a
the
lot of
potential?
people that don't know anything about it go and buy it. That's a
well,
potential.
it's like equity. You know, like this is there's a long you could look at like equity pricing theory, and it's like should it be equal to like is the old model in like the 1980s was like you should be able to look at like all the capital that the factory has, and this is what the price of the stock should be, you know, some multiple of its revenue and the dividends that it's paying. And like, you know, we all know that that's like Apple's trading at like whatever 200 times earnings or something like
Yeah,
that.
but
Like it
still
doesn't
they-
make any sense.
I know,
now.
but still there's value. There's still Apple. There's still tulips. There's still something.
But that's what this would be. This is almost like early stage VC investing, you could say, or the value of the community or the network.
Let's keep on.
But yeah, anyways, some other market downsides. Quick one would be competition. So, you know, this one should be relatively obvious. You're not all working together. You know, maybe if you start a free market for things, then you're actually naturally competing because the way that you distribute things is the winner takes all. So if, let's say like Ethereum and Solana, if we worked together, maybe we could come up with a better solution. But that's, the winner will unfortunately get everything. The third one should be obvious in the case of the land runs. Pre-existing distributions matter. So when you're setting up a distribution, if you're selling it in US dollars, distributions of US dollars matter. You know, this is what the plantation owners knew, that they have the money and they're okay with it being in US dollars. But what we're gonna get into and you should look at is like, okay, well like if you're auctioning off block space for hash power, how is energy distributed globally? How is hash power distributed? This can matter, and you kind of have to look at some of these distributions. And the last thing is unmeasured inputs. This is a common critique of market systems in that almost all markets assume that everything can be sort of put into economic terms. So you can think if two cars are identical, but one pollutes 10 times as much as the others. The way that, you know, most libertarian free market economists would say that it handles it is that, well, if the consumer doesn't like this pollution, they would price it in and they would be, you know, they would not be willing to pay as much for the car that pollutes as, you know, 10 times as much. Does it work out like that? Like, not necessarily. Like, you know, a lot of times, do you know exactly what the environmental damage is? Do you know, is the consumer aware? A lot of these market theories assume kind of this perfect information, which a lot of times doesn't exist. And another piece with like the economic inputs, important for crypto is like, if your system isn't paying for it, you're not valuing it. So you're sort of just left with what the market gives you and you can't complain about it. So like, the easiest example is like, the main example people give in traditional economics is like, if your economy has like, we pay wages for labor, we pay wages for like goods and services. Well, what about child care and community care? Does our economic system pay for this? Not necessarily. That's actually like a drag on, you know, most households. So you would be disincentivizing this in your economy. In crypto, let's say like, well, like what's a drag that like most people don't fund? I don't know. What about like core development? Do you fund it directly through token inflation? Maybe not. Or what about block explorers? These are kind of public good type things that if you don't specifically fund them, they're very important and necessary, but you're not going to get them. So now on to the crypto pieces. Crypto is like hypermarkets. So like you make these little codified systems and then you just like let them go on the world and you like hit the game theoretical outcome like faster than ever. And it's like really, really cool in that way. But you see like the downsides really, really fast, right? Like a lot of these things like tank and crash in what would take like normal Ponzi schemes, you know, years and lifetimes. Like we can do these things in days or weeks. Yeah. The biggest market in crypto is actually the security market. So not to go over the basics, I think most people know how blockchains work. They're shared databases. So we all have this database, and how do you sort of have security over this shared database? You basically, whoever gets to update the database, that's like whoever gets to propose and push the next block, you make it very, very expensive to be that person, and at least many times in a row. And if you do that, then you assume that that's how we secure things. That's like crypto economic security. To be the person that consistently updates the chain, it would cost you billions and billions of dollars. And we've done a really, really good job at it. So like Bitcoin with proof of work, what we say is, you know, if you buy the most ASIC miners and you put tons and tons of money down in energy costs and hardware costs, you get to update the next block. And it's secure because if you would buy up, you know, tons and tons of ASIC miners and then decide that you want to trash the chain, now all your ASIC miners are worth absolutely nothing, same with the energy that you output. So you're probably not going to do that. Ethereum, similar sense, you lock up a whole bunch of ether, and then we kind of take a round robin to propose the next block. And you would assume that basically you wouldn't lie about this because you would have to accumulate a lot of ETH in order to get multiple blocks in a row, and you're going to lose that ETH. So you're going to lose a whole bunch of money, and you're not going to even make anything because we'll detect you and fork you away afterwards. Hopefully that was proof of stake, summed up in a sentence. Okay. But yeah, I think, you know, it's done really, really well. But so this graph here, this was a one from last year on hash power distribution in Bitcoin. I didn't put entities there, but as you can see, 2 companies control almost all of the hash power of Bitcoin. This wasn't really the dream, right? Like we had all thought, like originally, like in 2011 or something, it was like you go and you download a Bitcoin miner. You're supposed to be able to run it on your computer and trade it around, and we all contribute to the security.
They're pools, though. Like
pools came about even later than the original.
no, but I mean the two big.
They are
things.
pools, yeah.
So the theory is that if one was
Then
doing
people
something,
would
the
go
miners,
in. Right.
the individuals that make up the pool could switch.
They could. But yeah, this is this ideal? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. You know, the other piece for ETH security markets, we'll rip on ETH too. You have, like last time I was here, I was talking about how Coinbase, like potentially we're gonna have a staked ETF eventually here in the US. So BlackRock or Goldman will say like, listen, if you invest in our ETF, we're gonna take your money and invest it in staked ETH, so you're gonna get a 4% return on the money that you put in. The problem with this is it very quickly would lead to like, whoever they pick as their custodian is gonna get a very, very large amount of the ETH in our system. They could potentially have, you know, greater than 50% of the ETH staked through this ETH ETF, and it would probably just go through Coinbase, because that's like the main custodian for most of this crypto. So like, if an ETF approval can ruin our entire proof of stake system, is that, you know, like, is that designed properly? Like, maybe not. Okay, another market structure, this one's more of a generic market structure I wanted to touch on, because I know this was like, our prediction market's still hot, or was this like last month, I think? Yeah, prediction markets, I think most of you probably know how prediction markets work. You have, you know, who's going to win the presidential election? Is it, you have Trump coins and Kamala coins. In universe 1, where Trump wins, these end up being worth $1. In universe 2, where Kamala wins, these would end up being worth $1. And so you can trade these tokens around. If, you know, basically like if the Trump tokens are trading at 60 cents on the dollar, you could then say, okay, there's probably about a 60% chance that Trump's going to win the election, right? If this sounds like gambling, it is gambling. It's kind of pure gambling. But the cool part is that you can get that information leak from it. So now you know that there's kind of an unbiased way to say, okay, Trump has a 60% chance of winning based on these markets. Other things that people are doing with prediction markets are, so like replicating science experiments. So you could say like, will this science experiment replicate in the next year? And then you can have other scientists bet on it. That's really cool. Now you can see whether or not we can believe it. Like you saw the DeepSeek thing last week. Like, will this be real or will it not be real? There's prediction markets with lots and lots of money of people saying that it looks like it's probably real, which is cool. Other things that you can do is for like news or truth events. If it comes out that like, oh, this politician was assassinated, should we believe it or not? Well, maybe if there was somebody spun up a prediction market on it, now you can have, okay, somebody's betting a lot of money that this actually happened. And now you can have some truth cut through some of the noise. That's at least the theory about what people are trying to do with these things.
It's also futarchy, decision making.
Futarchy, yeah. So futarchy would be if you have like a governance proposal in your DAO, for instance, to say like, should we do decision A or decision B? And you can bet on like which one will move the price of the token higher, for instance. Solid. But yeah, I think, so there's a lot of applications for this, but the problem is you have to think about what could be some of the issues with starting these markets. The first one I would point to would be like, you have to look at the pre-existing distributions. So if it's on like a presidential market, for instance, what you assume with these is that like people's bets are their confidence in the matter, right? So like if I'm betting with a lot of money, that would be that I have a lot of confidence that this is gonna happen, and if somebody else is betting with, not as much, it's not as much confidence. The problem is that if I bet with $10,000 on these markets, that means I'm probably pretty sure on it. Let's say Elon Musk, if he bets with $10,000, is he pretty sure on it? The answer is no, he probably doesn't care if he loses this at all, right? And so like money weights aren't necessarily even to confidence weights. The other piece too you have to look at is who's actually participating in these. This was a common critique during the presidential election. Obviously turned out okay for prediction markets, but maybe prediction markets that are done in crypto lean more towards people who are in crypto, and maybe they have a bias towards one of the answers. That might also skew some of your market results. And the other piece, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Hofstadter's law, but it's as soon as something becomes a metric, it ceases to be a good metric. So like as soon as you start using these things for the informational quality, they cease to be really good at providing informational quality. So as soon as you're like, kind of like the futarchy example, it's like, okay, let's say Jay says to the Uniswap DAO, I want a $25 million grant from Uniswap for True Blocks. Now he has an incentive to go try and throw the prediction market, right?
No, I would bet against that.
Right, but well, A, he could be betting against it, but he could also, he could move the market himself by doing some stupid action, or he could also, now he has an incentive to try and go throw this market. Maybe he could go say like, listen to a whale, like listen, go bet on this thing and throw it in my favor, go say it to Elon Musk and I'll give you half the money. And it's a sure thing. So you just really have to be careful with how you're using these things going forward. And I don't think a lot of people are thinking through beyond just the betting applications of it. Okay. Man, I can't.
Could you say what that law was again?
Hofstadter's law. Yeah.
I have another comment on this.
Cool.
These markets, basically you're roughly trying to gauge public opinion. That's what they're based on. Kind of, right? But the thing
Maybe.
You're trying to make money.
the thing
No, you're
is-
trying to find the truth.
Find right truth, but
Yes.
you're using basically a measurement of people's opinions as a way to gauge the truth. And often public opinion may not be true.
Well, I don't think you are doing public opinion And I think with prediction markets, what you're doing is you're using people who are betting, then create this giant bounty for people who actually know the truth to come and tell the answer, right? So like if you have like sport, like in Trump and Kamala, like most people have no idea, right? It's just their opinion. But then like if you actually know and do the research, then you have an incentive to say, listen, like I know it's actually more like 70-30 Trump, so I'm gonna go put a whole bunch of money on this thing and be able to make money. So you're incentivizing research to come out.
Yeah, but it's still very opinion-based.
Not
For example,
necessarily.
I used to
Yeah,
love
it depends.
betting. I used to love betting
Yeah.
sports, right? And I used to make money by placing bets. Let's say, you know, college championships, Georgetown is playing Villanova, real cases, right? I could place a bet in DC and get better odds in Georgetown.
Sure.
And place the same bet in Philly and get better odds in Villanova and keep the difference.
So that's just because it was not a global market, right? So you're
But the
basically
thing is, the opinion in those areas were slighted.
Yeah.
So even the people with money that research, if you're in DC, you're still biased. You can't get away from that human bias.
Yeah, well, I mean, you saw this in prediction markets too, like actually like, so like, so prediction markets are legal most places in the world besides the US. So in the US, like people were on Polymarket and doing it in crypto land, and it was like 60-40 Trump. But on like the prediction markets over in Europe, it was like 50-50.
Right.
And so there was clearly an arbitrage opportunity that people weren't taking advantage of, probably for regulatory reasons. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Okay, last little crypto example here would be fee markets. So in addition to just building the next block and having security on that, the proposer of the next block also gets to decide which transactions are in the block. So, the way that it was supposed to work, or that most people thought it would work, was whenever it's your turn, you get to, let's say we're on proof of stake here, and it's your turn, you're the proposer, and you get to pick the next block. How do you get to pick? What we said is you have this mempool. These are people who are sending transactions and trying to get into the block. You should go and you're just going to pick the people who are paying the highest gas, right? So he's saying I'll pay $1, he's saying I'll pay $2, he's saying I'll pay $3. I only fit the top 2, so I put them in the block. That's how we assumed that it was going to work. Go to the highest bidder. The problem is that people very, very quickly, I think even before it launched, realized you could reorder these transactions to make extra money. So as an example, and you can even insert your own. So as an example, let's say Jay he wants to buy 100 Melania coin on Uniswap. And so he places a market order to do this. If it's my turn to propose the block, I can buy it right before him and then sell it to him at a higher price than he would have bought it otherwise. So what I did is I guaranteed money for myself, whatever that spread was, and I guaranteed a worse price for Jay. This happens all the time. And so basically, whenever it's my turn to propose a block, there's these centralized entities called builders. And what they do is they scan the mempool for these opportunities. Like how can they rearrange these blocks and insert their own transactions to make the most possible money? And so what I would do is instead of just picking the people with the highest gas, I'll sell it to one of these guys to say, listen, you give me more money than I would make otherwise, and then you can pick the transactions. And this is great. Like me as a proposer, I make way more money. The big problem is that this is the separation. Like two guys own like the whole thing, right? And it's not necessarily bad in that like we can always switch to just doing our own, right? The problem is that they censor sometimes. So like back whenever Tornado Cash was illegal, like 4 days ago, they wouldn't let, a lot of these guys wouldn't let Tornado Cash transactions in, so privacy transactions. So if they're censoring your blockchain, is that good? Probably not. The other thing too is that, in the past, whenever you would send a transaction, you would send it to what was the public mempool. So like that's the list of transactions that are waiting to get inside of a block. What these guys say is just send it directly to us and we'll make sure that nobody gets in front of you. Well, now there basically is no public mempool now. Like everybody just goes to them. Because, so like now, what's happening to the network? This wasn't something that we had sort of predicted. We had predicted that people would be doing MEV, but we didn't think it would be this centralized.
It's built into it's built into the node software now. Like when you run an Ethereum node and run a validator, it's a flag that you put on, like you want to use the MEV boost, you want to let the builders build the blocks so you can
Comment?
Is
Jim?
it illegal to do this in public market, in public stock markets? It's called
Front run?
Isn't that what this is?
Well,
Is it
they say it's
anyway-
not
what
front
way is
running
it?
because anybody can do it. It's a
And
race.
then it's also
Yeah.
just stunning to me that the whole community just sits by and just takes this hit. We're just taking this hit and trading these things and giving away. I mean, I guess we're not giving away money because we have no other alternative.
Well, you do, you can put limit, you don't have to do market. So,
Well, other people, there are ways to solve it. They all have like slight trade-offs, you know? There's good ways and bad ways, but
I don't understand why anybody will trade on the market price rather than just put a limit on it, eventually we'll get there.
sure.
Because we're ignorant?
Yeah.
That's why I do it.
It's because I'm trading.
But it's very simple, I mean, it actually tells you what do you want to do market order or limit, and this the bid and this the ask,
But
you
then you have to
just press
think,
buttons.
that's really.
You can still take advantage of it even if you put a limit order. But I mean, but when you trade like on AMMs, like there's usually a
threshold.
threshold. Like it won't just go at any price. So, but they can still reorder the blocks. In most cases, so they can acquire the tokens at a lower price and still give it to you at your limit. So you
Yeah, but
would
this is
have,
different.
you would have
This-
otherwise been able to get a lower price.
Yeah, but if I put limit, I mean, I'm willing to pay for this
Yeah.
much, not more,
So that's, so I mean, to some people that's a problem, they could have gotten a lower price. To some people, like you say, hey, I got the price I was expecting, so it's fine.
This was Robinhood gave that excuse too. You know, whenever Robinhood's the centralized trading firm, and they were selling all of their order flow from their front end to, who was it, Citadel. And Citadel was saying, listen, everybody was placing limit orders and market orders, and we gave them just as good of a price as they would have gotten otherwise. And that was their excuse, but the SEC still dinged them because they said, no, like, you're still making a profit on other markets. You know, you're front running, even if you're not front running these people, you're front running other exchanges. You're using this information in ways that isn't actually fair. And that was why they got in trouble. So, all right, and that's why I put this one. You know, like, how can we solve it? You know, like, hopefully you guys realize from some of these examples, there's like probably hundreds of more market examples we could go through. Like, distributions matter, like, in a lot of this stuff, and we care about like that you're actually decentralized. And some people have said like, okay, well, how about instead of just giving it to anonymous people, we say we're going to give it to actual people and then distribute it evenly, right? This makes sense, and we can hard code it in. WorldCoin. So if you've ever seen WorldCoin, it's run by Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy. They have these like creepy looking orbs at crypto conferences, and they scan your eyeballs, and you get a wallet that's tied to a ZK proof of your retina. And he had this idea, you know, non-unique, that we should give UBI to everyone in our system, so everyone gets some UBI if you have a WorldCoin wallet. That sounds great, right? Now the distributions are perfect. Well, this was 2 weeks ago. They caught a bunch of people with a WorldCoin orb gathering up homeless people in Germany and scanning their eyeballs and taking their UBI. So it's hard. You just push the trust to a different layer. Like Idena, there was actually a similar story. This isn't even a unique story in that Idena was a proof of personhood currency from back in, I think it was like 2019. You would have to do CAPTCHAs every day multiple times to prove that you're a human, and then you would get this like UBI reward and be part of their ecosystem. There were sweatshops set up in Indonesia, and the owners of these sweatshops were making their employees set up identa wallets to get UBI, and it's like, you know, this is like, you have to think really hard about what you're actually incentivizing here, because like you don't want to be incentivizing sweatshops or rounding up homeless people. So yeah, it's not even as easy as picking one person. All right. So what is it about? This will be like the last story. And one of my favorite tropes in economics is the idea of one more lane. So if you see traffic in your city, the city planners and the local politicians will always say, like, listen, you just gotta add one more lane, right? Well, study after study has shown it never works out. Basically, as you increase supply, demand increases at the exact same rate. And it makes sense, right? If you add more lanes, people will move out. You know, if you're willing to commute 30 minutes to the city, you'll move out as far as that will let you, and so will everybody else. Also, if you can get deliveries in the city faster, maybe people will be ordering more deliveries. If a developer sees that there's better roads going in, maybe he'll build higher skyscrapers. So widening the lanes doesn't necessarily do much for reducing traffic. But what it does do is it completely changes the footprint of your city. So rather than being, say, a smaller town, now you have a sprawling metropolis with skyscrapers. So the question shouldn't be, should we be adding one more lane? It's like, well, what kind of city do you want to have? That's the actual question. If you're trying to maximize revenue as a city, maybe adding one more lane works. But if you're trying to live in the city, maybe you don't want to do that. So, back here onto, the free market solution for the roads is simple. Like, you're gonna have private toll roads. There's more demand for roads, so you're gonna have thousands and thousands of roads, and there's nothing that you can do about it. But luckily for our systems, like, we're not pure free markets. Like, we all like to assume code is law, and maybe for like Bitcoin it is at this point, but for everything else, it's still relatively early. Like, we're still designing these systems as we go. So we kind of get to choose the parameters about how many lanes we want to add. So I posted up here, like in Ethereum, we have a lot of debates going on right now about what is the purpose of Ethereum. So are we a digital money? Are we a world computer? Are we a global financial stock exchange? Are we a meme coin? Like, nobody really knows and nobody agrees on it. But we do know what's actually happening is it's a casino for tokens. So you have to trade off, are the Bitcoiners happy with where Bitcoin is? Maybe some are not. So this was, I stole this from Vitalik's article on like what is North Star. We really have to think about, what is the purpose of a lot of these systems? Are we actually getting there? If a Coinbase ETF comes along and it's going to trash the entire distribution of your staking system, what you need to do is you either need to have a way to deter this from happening, or you have to have a way that if it does happen, you're okay with it and it's part of your narrative. And it's just not too difficult. So, anyway, guys, that was about it. Hopefully I taught you guys something. Hopefully it was something. Who wants to chat more markets?
I have a couple questions. Anybody have questions?
Yeah. What's up, man?
Just curious, you read a lot of books, like where do you come up with your
Yeah, no, I don't know. A lot of this was, people have been talking about this stuff for a long time, and